what you think about Davos. I say, with pleasure. I have to tell you, in 1995, I had no clue what Davos conference was about. So I went to Davos in January 1995. And I was just an observer. I was impressed by the quality of the people, but I was a little bit disappointed by the quality of the organization. It was very simple. So he asked me to make a report. So I made a 5-page report of what we should do to improve and to reinvent the Davos Forum. So then I shared that with Klaus Schwab, and he told me, you know what, Richard? Let's reinvent Davos together. Let's work for me. I don't know, Professor, I cannot work for you, but I can work with you.
من المغرب، بداية لم تبنى بالنهاية، والتحول كان العنوان. من بلاط الإليزيه إلى المكتب البيضاوي وأحلام الفتى الطائر. وصف بأنه الرجل الذي يهمس أحياناً في بعض آذان رؤساء الدول، وأنه مستشار الحكام وصديق الملوك، وقد أقنع الكثير من رجال الأعمال والقادة بالاستثمار في بلدان مختلفة، بل لعب دوراً كبيراً في تغيير ملامح الاستثمار، وصنع أحداثاً مهمة أينما حل، حتى أصبح أيقونة مفصلية في الاقتصاد العالمي. ريتشارد أتياس، الرئيس التنفيذي وعضو مجلس إدارة مؤسسة مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار في مخيال. سيد ريتشارد، مساء الخير. سعيدين جدا بانضمامك لبرنامج مخيال. أنا عارف هذه الأيام تبقى أيام قليلة على مؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار. شكرا لوقتك أن تكون هنا معنا في برنامج مخيال.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, for having me today. It's a pleasure. It's my pleasure to be here.
العفو. تبغى نبدأ بالأسئلة الصعبة ولا الأسئلة السهلة؟
Oh, you know, there is no difficult questions, there is no easy questions. So I'm at your disposal. You are the boss today.
أنا راح أرجع للتاريخ، ومن خلال بحثي وجدت أنه ريتشارد أتياس من أصول مغربية يهودية. تربط علاقة ريتشارد أتياس بالعائلة المالكة في المغرب. أبغى أعرف هذه العلاقة بين عائلة ريتشارد أتياس والعائلة المالكة في المغرب.
Thank you. So you are starting with something important for me, which is my roots. Because to understand anybody, it's important to go back to the DNA, the roots of the family. So I'm extremely proud to be a Moroccan citizen. My families, both sides, were in Morocco for almost 5 centuries. Started in the 1500s. So my mother family came from Spain 500 years ago, and my father family came from Netherlands. And indeed, during that time, dealing with royalties was much more easy than today. Everyone was part of the same family almost, you know. In Morocco, everybody knows everyone. And indeed, my late grandfather, Allah yarhamu, was the tailor of the late King Mohammed V. And they became extremely close. And almost every day, the late King Mohammed V, before going to his office, was stopping and spending 1 hour with my late grandfather, having coffee, tea, the Moroccan tea, the famous Moroccan tea, together. And this is how the relationship between my family and the royal family started. And of course, my grandmother also was working for the wife of the late king. And then my father became also close to the brother of the king, the late Prince Moulay Abdeslam. They become very close. And when I was born, I was surrounded by these people. And for me, it was almost natural because we didn't realize, to be honest, what is happening today, where, of course, royalties and leaders are almost inaccessible. But we owe a lot to the Moroccan royal family. I am the last of a family of 4 brothers and sisters, but my brother and my sisters were even benefiting from support from the royal family when they were sent to France to study. So they paid for their studies. And this is why we have this huge attachment to the royal family and, by the way, all Moroccan citizens, like in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You have so much respect. And the royal family, the leadership, is almost the DNA of the country. So this is the history and the roots.
أنا عرفت الآن يعني طبيعة عمل جدك، لكن بالنسبة لوالدك ما هي طبيعة عمله في المغرب وخصوصاً مع العائلة المالكة في المغرب؟
My late father studied accounting and finance. But he was following the tradition of his family, which is he started in the gems trade. You know, he was trading gems with his brother. I was born, and I remember, you are reminding me something amazing. When I was a very little boy, I was coming to the kitchen, and I was seeing on the table of the kitchen in the morning some emeralds, some diamonds, like if it was natural, you know, and they were talking between them about selling, buying. So, but one day, and it was before I was born, but it's part of the histories that we tell in the family, the late Amir Moulay Abdeslam, the brother of late Mohammed V, king, told to my father, listen, this is not a job for you. It's not a real job to trade gems. You should work for the administration. This is a real job. So he left the family business and he moved to the civil works government affairs, and he became the head of the procurement for all the civil works of the Kingdom of Morocco, which was at that time, which was in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, in full transformation. It was a kingdom in motion. And I always remember seeing my father when I was going out from school. I was making a stop in his office almost every day, spending half an hour with him and listening to what he was doing. So he was dealing with all these big contractors, international, who were coming to the Kingdom of Morocco to help on building the kingdom and transforming the kingdom in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
الغريب إنه 1974 انتقلت عائلتكم من المغرب إلى فرنسا، وأنت كنت تقريبا بعمر 16 سنة. لماذا هذا الانتقال؟
You know, at that time, no high schools were existing in Morocco. No engineering schools. No really big architecture schools. And why I'm mentioning that? Because my brother and my sisters were obliged to leave Morocco to go to Europe to study and to do the high studies. My late brother was a doctor. My late sister was a dentist. My sister is an architect. So I was the last one. So when came my turn to move and to go to study engineering, because this is what I wanted to do, mathematics, physics, engineering, my mother said, no way. I cannot stay alone without my kids. So she was pushing and harassing my father, who was heartbroken to leave Morocco and to follow the kids, because we're all studying in France. And of course, we're studying in France because, as you know, we got French education in Morocco because Morocco was a French colony. So this is why we moved all to Morocco. But almost 20 years later, I came back to Morocco. You never forget your roots. I am so attached to my roots that in 2014, almost 10 years ago, I decided to buy a house in Marrakesh, and I tried to spend as much time as I can. And I was so excited because I saw again my friends, the school's friends. We never lost the friendship. All my friends that I made in Morocco are friends that I met 60 years ago, and we are still friends. And we almost speak on the phone every week, and we follow what each of us was doing, which is amazing. We have a group of 20 people who were all at school since the age of 5, and we are still friends today, 60 years later.
يبقى فضول الصحفيين، لذلك أتمنى صدرك يتسع لبعض الأسئلة. أنت انتقلت من المغرب بعمر 16 سنة. الكثير يسأل لماذا ريتشارد أتياس لا يتحدث اللغة العربية وهو قضى وقت طويل في المغرب.
You know, I am someone who like perfection and excellence. So I cannot speak اللغة العربية الفصحى because in Morocco we learn الدارجة. So if you go to Morocco, I will speak with you in Moroccan Arabic. I'm fluent on Moroccan Arabic, which we call الدارجية because I was practicing with my nanny, with my friends, and but unfortunately it's like a dialect, you know. By the way, I learned classical Arabic, as we're saying in Morocco. I was even the first in my class, believe it or not, at the age of 12, 13, 14. But you need to practice. And I'm so happy that I spend more and more time in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the region, because now I understand almost 90% of what you can say.
MashaAllah.
But I cannot practice and be fluent because I hate to make mistakes, especially grammatical mistakes. But to the people who will watch, or our friends, I want them to know that I'm still attached to my roots and to Arabic language. And by the way, I'm pushing my daughter to learn and to be fluent in Arabic also, even if she lives in Miami now, in America, and the grandkids also, because it is our roots. So it's so important to understand the philosophy, the science. And I always say that the Arabs, we invented mathematics, we invented astronomy, we are part of the science history with Avicenne and many others, and Ibn Battuta, the great explorer. So if you want to understand the culture, you need also to speak the language.
جميل. الآن بنتقل لحياتك المهنية. بعد انتقالك إلى فرنسا درست الهندسة المدنية، أيضا عملت في أول وظيفة في شركة IBM. بعدها، هذه بداية الثمانينات، بعدها تقريبا في 1990 أسست شركتك الأولى بيبلسس إيفنتس. هنا انطلقت إلى مجال إدارة المؤتمرات والتجارة. لماذا هذا الانتقال من مهندس إلى هذا العمل في إدارة المؤتمرات والتجارة؟
So in 1983, when I became a civil engineer, I was looking for what is the best company in the world. I was ambitious, and I wanted also to be part of what I was feeling, which is the technology transformation. So I tried to be recruited by IBM, which was at that time the #1 company in the world. And I was recruited. It was a big honor for me, for my family. They were so happy that, my God, one of the members of the family joined IBM. and I spent 3 years at IBM. But I realized very quickly that dealing with machines, with computers every day was not my cup of tea. But at that time, IBM was the company which invented the first personal computer. But we're more talking about hardwares than softwares. My generation missed the internet bubble. So after 3 years, I decided to leave IBM and to become an entrepreneur, because this is what I have in my blood. I realized that I want to be my own boss. So I started the computer leasing company. And after 3 years again, I say, this is definitely not for me. What am I missing? I am missing people. I am missing the contact with people. So instead of building bridges as a civil engineer, I decided to build bridges between people, and between countries, and between continents, and between communities, and between religions. And this is why I decided to create a global event company focused on building conferences, on bringing people together, on building platforms of dialogues. And believe it or not, 35 years later, I still do the same.
وما في شك أنت نجحت نجاح باهر وعالميا في هذا المجال.
Oh, you are too nice. Thank you.
بداية التسعينات كان هناك انهيار الاتحاد السوفيتي وصعود إقامة دولة الاتحاد الروسي. قرر أول رئيس لروسيا لزيارة فرنسا، وهذه كانت أول زيارة ونقلة نوعية في العلاقات الجديدة بين روسيا وفرنسا. ريتشارد أتياس هو من نظم هذا الحدث الكبير، لكن هناك يعني سؤال مهم. شخصية أول رئيس في روسيا يلتسن كانت شخصية مثيرة للجدل، خصوصاً في الزيارات الخارجية. ما هي أكبر مخاوف ريتشارد أتياس، وهو تو مبتدئ يعني في هذا المجال، بأن ينظم هذا الحدث الكبير؟
You are very well informed, Mr. Abdullah, because not a lot of people knows about what happened to me. It was the beginning of my career. I will share with you a very personal anecdote because it's very interesting. In fact, when I started this event company, no one knew about it. So before even I started to make noise and to publicize and to advertise what I was doing, I got a call from a family friend. And that lady was working for the President Mitterrand's wife, the First Lady of France. And she told me, Richard, I learned that you are doing events now. I need you to help me. I said, on what? Oh, the president of the Federation of Russia, he's one of the president of Russia, it was the president of the parliament. A guy called Boris Yeltsin is coming to France, to the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Can you help me? Frankly, I had zero experience. I was just starting. I said, okay, I have nothing to do. I started my company almost 2 months ago, so I will go with you in Strasbourg, where the European Parliament headquarters was based. To do what? To help hosting this Russian delegation. To make a long story short, I spent 3 days with this gentleman called Boris Yeltsin, that nobody knew, with his Russian delegation. They were only speaking Russian, and I was helping him to navigate inside the European Parliament. In the middle of the night, 3 a.m. in the morning, his chief of staff came to my room and told me, you are in charge of the organization. I say, yes. We want tomorrow to go to Paris, and we want to meet with the President Mitterrand. I said, oh my God, this is not in the plan. And I called my friend, I said, listen, I am in trouble now. The president of the Federation Russian Parliament wants to go to Paris. What should I do? And he's making noise, and it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and they are very vocal. So let me see what I can do. Thanks God, the next morning she told me, okay, you know what? He cannot meet with President Mitterrand, but he can come to Paris, and we'll try to organize some meetings with him, with the mayor of Paris, which was at that time Jacques Chirac, with the president of the French Parliament, which was Laurent Fabius. So I told to the morning, gentlemen, we are going to Paris. Boris Yeltsin was extremely happy. We went to Paris at 7 p.m. in the evening. We went to the Élysée Palace to meet with who? With the Secretary General of the French president. But in the middle of the conversation, President Mitterrand showed up, and he started to talk to Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin was extremely happy. After the meeting, we went to the airport. He called his interpreter and said, tell to Richard that I want him to come into Moscow, and I want him to work for me. I said, Mr. President, it's not possible. He said, why? I said, because I don't have a visa. And guess what? The next morning, Boris Yeltsin was in Moscow on the tank, and this is where he did the coup, and Mikhail Gorbachev left, and Boris Yeltsin became president of Russia. And then 1 week after, he called me. I was extremely surprised, and his chief of staff told me, President Yeltsin is insisting. He wants you to come again and to work with us, and he wants to create the Russia House. And the Russia House will be the gateway for all investors to come to Russia, because he knows that you could be a great businessman. I say, I'm really sorry. I just got married. I have a baby who is 12 months old. I cannot come to Russia now, but maybe one day. This is my story with President Yeltsin, and this is how I started. And what is very funny, after a few years, I was supporting and helping President Clinton on other stuff. And I was part of the meeting between President Clinton and Boris Yeltsin. And when Yeltsin saw me like many years later, he was remembering all that Paris trip. And we had some great connection with the late President Yeltsin, who was having a lot of sense of humor.
يبقى السؤال ما هو السر على إصراره في أن يريدك أن تعمل معه؟
You know, in fact, President Yeltsin is probably the president who opened Russia to the world. We are all talking about this oligarch, you know, like Abramovich and all these guys who became multi-billionaire. He's the one who started the transformation of Russia, the end of USSR. And he was quite a visionary guy. He brought a lot of investors. And he's the one who was working with a mayor of St. Petersburg called Putin. So Putin is one of Yeltsin's boys. And frankly speaking, working with Eltsine, I was following what he was doing. Quite interesting things to do, because he's one of the first Russian president who started good relationship with the West and making connection between the West and Russia and opening Russia to the world. It was very instructive.
جميل. سيد ريتشارد، إذا تتذكر 1986 حدثت جولة الأورغواي. هذه الجولة كانت تتعلق بمعالجة عديد من الأمور فيما يتعلق في التجارة العالمية. هذه الجولة انتهت بأعمال جولة وصار في مؤتمر مهم، وهو مؤتمر مراكش، اللي من خلاله تم إنشاء منظمة التجارة العالمية. أنت منظمت هذا الحدث الكبير والتاريخي. ما هي الظروف الاقتصادية والسياسية في تلك الفترة اللي دعت لإنشاء منظمة التجارة العالمية؟
This is an important milestone of my life.
كيف؟
Because it is when I got a call from the Moroccan government. I was not back to Morocco since I left. And one day the Minister of Tourism of Morocco contacted me. And he told me, oh, I know you have your own event management company. I was told by a friend of a friend. Would you come tomorrow to Rabat? I said, okay, to do what? We would like you to answer to a proposal on how can you help us, how you can help the country to host a big conference, which will be the creation of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. So I went to Rabat. I was in competition with many giants on how to organize this international conference. And then, at the end of my presentation, I was a very small company, 30 people, and I was competing against giants. And the person who was leading the conversation at the end told me, can I ask you a question, Richard? Why are you so passionate and wants to organize this conference? I said, because you are giving me the opportunity to go back to my roots, to go back to my native country. And my family was supporting the kingdom for years. So if I can support, it will be fantastic. Your family? Who is exactly your family? I said, but my late grandfather from my mother's side is Mimoun Botbol. The guy he came, he kissed my head, and he told me, you are doing the WTO conference. So in 3 months, we worked night and days to create this conference, which was what? It was the creation of an institutional body to be the next steps of the GATT agreement, which is a global agreement on trade and tariffs. And the whole world, all countries were in agreement to create an institution which will help globalization, which will help global economies. Because the trade agreement, the GATT, was a little bit restrictive. It was not tackling the issues of agriculture, on services, and the global economy was becoming very open. It was about intellectual property. So all heads of state were in agreement that we should have an institution which still exists today, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, to regulate and to put some rules and some laws about how to deal on intellectual property, on agriculture, on trade, on tariffs, etc. So it was a very important moment in 1994 when this agreement was signed in Marrakesh. And my career started really thanks to this event. Why? Because at the closing session for the signature, a leader went on stage. And he said, before signing the agreement on behalf of the United States of America, I would like to congratulate the Kingdom of Morocco for the quality of the organization. And everybody started to say, but who was behind the organization? It was your humble servant here. And this is when the phone started to ring for people asking me to organize other conferences. And that gentleman was Al Gore, the Vice President of the United States of America. So I owe a lot to Al Gore, and he knows that because I saw him after when I was organizing the Nobel Laureates Conference, because he was a Nobel Prize, as you know. And this was one of the turning points of my life. So the GATT was extremely important and the WTO for the world, but that event was extremely important for me personally in my professional life.
هل تتذكر أهم الشخصيات اللي تعرفت عليها وصار في ارتباط قوي بينك وبينه في هذا المؤتمر؟
So in fact, that conference was with dozens and dozens of head of states. This is when I realized and I learned from that conference, one of the lessons, that multilateralism, what we're talking about today, that international cooperation, that globalization was not negotiable. And that the global economy will have to take that in consideration. I learned that nationalism will not be working, that protectionism is not working, and that we have absolutely to support international cooperation. I felt the moment where I saw all world leaders in total agreement, aligned that we need to be united and we need to learn from each other. And this is, I think, the main lesson I got. In terms of my own work, I learned how to deal with leaders, how to definitely improvise ourselves to be a great architect of global events, and that for this event, only perfection. There is zero tolerance on the quality of what you do and how you work with leaders. So I learned from both sides in terms of content and in terms of organization.
أيضا في بداية التسعينات الميلادية حدثت اتفاقيات أوسلو. هذه الاتفاقيات اللي كانت بين الفلسطينيين والإسرائيليين واللي غيرت شكل المنطقة بعد هذه الاتفاقيات. أنت نظمت مؤتمر الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا واللي كان يعنى بتقريب الاقتصاد بين دول المنطقة وإسرائيل. السؤال الأول، من الذي طلب منك تنظيم هذا المؤتمر؟
So this is another important moment. And by coincidence, everything was happening in Morocco the same year. The WTO
نعم.
and the Casablanca Conference for Peace and Economic Development. This was organized by the World Economic Forum. First time that the World Economic Forum came and organized with the government of Morocco. In fact, it was part of my follow-up with the WTO organization. So the government of Morocco told me, Richard, we are hosting a conference. We are bringing some international institutions, the UN, including the World Economic Forum. But in fact, it was organized by the government of Morocco. So I was asked by the Royal Palace of Morocco to try to put together this conference, which was a follow-up on the Oslo Accord, if you remember that. First time that Israelis, Palestinian, United States of America, and many Arab countries came together to try to discuss for the first time, not just on peace, but about how can we do economic development transformation for the region. How can we work on prosperity together? First time that the late Yitzhak Rabin was with the late Yasser Arafat, the late King Hussein of Jordan, and of course the late King Hassan of Morocco. So this was a very important moment. And this is when peace between Jordan and Israel started. So at that time we were all extremely optimistic about what would be the future of the region. And look, unfortunately, where we are almost 40 years or 30 years later. But we were all extremely optimistic. But it was the beginning of the light at the end of the tunnel. And what was discussed at that time in Casablanca is still accurate today. This is my personal conviction. When you put together people around the table and you discuss about economic transformation, about investment, about all these things, then you are sending a very strong positive message to the people and you send a message of hope. So this is what was this Casablanca conference. And it was the beginning of a process, because after they met again in Amman, they met again in Cairo, and this is when Egypt started also the peace with Israel. But I would say it was, to summarize and to answer to your question, probably the first act of the peace in this region. Of course, since then, we have, unfortunately, a lot of conflict again, and the key issue is not yet solved, but inshallah it will be solved one day.
لكن هذا المؤتمر نجح وحقق أهدافه في تلك الفترة؟
Yes, at the time it succeeded. Why? Because number one, international cooperation between Jordan, even Egypt at the beginning, and the other players in the region started. Number two, the impossible was possible. The check hands between the LPO leader, Yasser Arafat, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, blessed by the King of Jordan and the United States of America, was something that we cannot imagine a single minute. And after that, they signed the peace agreement with this beautiful moment at the White House with Bill Clinton, if you remember well. So I think it was one of the great outcomes. And this is when Yitzhak Rabin, Yasser Arafat, and Bill Clinton got the Peace Nobel Prize. We should never forget that. We should always look at some positive moment on our humanity to be sure that, like the President Clinton, when he became president, and at his inaugural speech, at his inauguration, he said something important. He said, there is nothing wrong in America which could not be corrected by what is good in America. And when you send this message of optimism, it also shows that you can always hope, even if we are in a moment of war, of destruction. There is always the half full glass that we should look at. So I think this was a good outcome because it shows that nothing is impossible. And this is one of the main outcomes. And as you saw after that, years later, you had the Abraham Accord, which are also part of, I would say, what happened in Casablanca. And we'll see what will happen later and later. But this is politics, which is not really...
سيد ريتشارد، إذا سمحت لي، في عام 1995، وصحح لي إذا كنت أنا مخطئ في التاريخ، التقيت مع كلاوس شواب رئيس المنتدى الاقتصادي العالمي. كيف بدأت العلاقة مع كلاوس شواب في تلك الفترة؟
You know, Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum decided after the peace conference in Casablanca to host the first World Economic Forum, MENA, Middle East North Africa Conference in Casablanca. And of course, the Moroccan government told them, we know a guy who is one of ours, Riyad Atiyas, who can help you to organize a conference. So they contacted me, and it was my first meeting with the World Economic Forum, not yet with Klaus Schwab.
هو من تواصل معك؟
In fact, the Kingdom of Morocco gave my name, and then the World Economic Forum, his nephew, Hans-Jörg Schwab, who was working at the World Economic Forum, contacted me and told me, can you help us to organize our first ever economic conference in Morocco and, in fact, in the MENA region? I said, okay, no problem. So we organized that conference, which was a great success. And then I left Casablanca. I was at the airport. My flight was delayed by 2 hours. And who was in the lounge? Klaus Schwab. His flight was also delayed. He told me, I know you know. I say, no, you don't know me, but I know who you are, Professor. But I'm the man who was behind the organization of your conference. He told me, amazing. Can you come to Geneva in a few days? I say, yes, why? I would like you to be my guest at my Davos conference, and I would like you to tell me what you think about Davos. I say, with pleasure. I have to tell you, in 1995, I had no clue what Davos conference was about. So I went to Davos in January 1995, and I was just an observer. I was impressed by the quality of the people, but I was a little bit disappointed by the quality of the organization. It was very simple. So he asked me to make a report. So I made a 5-page report of what we should do to improve and to reinvent the Davos Forum. So then I shared that with Klaus Schwab, and he told me, you know what, Richard? Let's reinvent Davos together. Let's work for me. I told him, no, Professor, I cannot work for you, but I can work with you. And we started together in 1995, a joint venture, Global Event Management, a company, 50-50, based in Geneva, and my first reinvention of Davos was in January 1996. This is when I started to produce and to be the executive producer of the Davos Forum for many years. And then I was working very close with Klaus and his team. And we came with many ideas about how to bring technology to Davos, how to create regional summits. I went to China to create the first World Economic Forum in China. Then we did that in Europe, then in Africa, in South Africa, and so far and so on. This is when my history and my story with the World Economic Forum started.
أثناء عملك في مؤتمر دافوس، هل كلاوس شواب كان يتعمد بأن يكون مؤتمر دافوس مؤتمر اقتصادي سياسي وليس فقط اقتصادي؟
You know, the World Economic Forum didn't start at the World World Economic Forum. It started as an idea of Klaus Schwab, who was a professor in Zurich, as a European Management Forum. It was called the European Management Forum, if I'm not mistaken. The idea and the concept behind was to bring every year European CEOs to learn a little bit from the American CEOs, because the Americans were a little bit more pioneers on some practices, on technology already in the 80s. So this is how it started. And then a few years later, Klaus Schwab, when he saw the success of his meetings, which were purely business, he decided to call it the World Economic Forum, to make it bigger and to invite political leaders, NGOs, international organizations. So this is how the machine started. But initially, it was just a mini forum for European leaders, almost like classes about understanding how to improve your day-to-day management as a CEO. And then it became this global organization with members, 1,000, the biggest 1,000 companies in the world. And he was inviting many other leaders to have this conversation between public, private sectors, between NGOs, and also between, I would say, international organizations and the global CEOs. And Davos is what it is today, which is more than half-century old organization.
أنا أعرف أنك أنت من الشخصيات المؤمنين بدول الخليج بزمان، يعني في هذا الشأن. هل كان في منتصف التسعينات إلى أواخر التسعينات بداية الألفية كان في حضور قوي لدول الخليج في مؤتمر دافوس؟
Not at all. Not at all. The World Economic Forum and Davos in particular was very American and European oriented. Even in the 90s, we were not seeing a lot of Chinese. Very few people from the Middle East. Almost nobody from Africa. It was not very inclusive. And I think 2-3 people were only representing Saudi Arabia. I know exactly who. But His Excellency, for example, Khaled Al-Falah was one of the first at that time representing Aramco.
عام كم تقريبا؟
Oh, it was in the late 90s. And by the way, my first connection with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was thanks to Davos, because I met 2-3 Saudi leaders, businessmen, who told me, you should come and visit our country. Same with the UAE. I met some leaders from the UAE, 2-3, who were coming to Davos regularly, and they told me you should visit Dubai. At that time, UAE was people were more talking about Dubai than Abu Dhabi. So Davos was not very inclusive, including with the media. You know, the media were on the side of the street, on the other side of the street. And not a lot of young people, because to be part of Davos, you need to be above 40 years old at that time. So this is when started the full transformation of trying to be more inclusive. And I learned from what I thought at that time were mistakes, were things missing. I am someone who is a strong believer on the power of the young generation. Someone who is a strong believer on inclusivity. Someone who is a strong believer that everyone should be around the table, not just the elite, not just the powerful. We should learn from everybody. When I start some conferences, if you want to talk about the future of a city, who you should put on stage? The mayor of the city, but next to who? A taxi driver. The taxi driver will tell you what are the problems of a city. Because he or she, when drive the car for 12 hours, including in the middle of the night, they know what is happening in the city. They know the problem of road traffic. They know the problem of security. They know what is happening in a city. This is why each time I land in a city, I speak non-stop with the taxi driver because he's the pulse of a city. So this is what was missing.
سيد ريتشارد، هذه الأفكار تجعلني أطرح سؤال مهم جدا. هل كان لديك فيجن، رؤية في مؤتمر دافوس، وأيضا كلاوس شواب كان لديه رؤية أخرى؟
You know,
أم كنتم متفقين؟
I have a lot of respect for what Davos is as a global platform. I think they are missing a lot of things today, and this is why many other international conferences are bringing to the table what was missing there. And I think also there is a lack of tangible actions. You know, some people criticize Davos, but it's a game happening for years and years, because many people think that Davos is a place only for the rich and the famous and the elite. And it's not inclusive. Some people are calling it like the temple of capitalism. But many great things were achieved in Davos, great conversations. So I think it's not black or white, you know. You have good things and you have things which should be improved. And I learned a lot from my 15 years partnering with the World Economic Forum. And this is why when I started my own conferences and platforms, I tried to fill the gap and the vacuum which was existing in Davos.
إذا تتذكر 2001 بعد أحداث 11 سبتمبر، في تلك السنة مؤتمر دافوس جعل موضوع المؤتمر الرئيسي هو الأمن والإرهاب وتأثيرهما على الاقتصاد. لماذا طرحتوا هذه الفكرة في مؤتمر دافوس في تلك الفترة؟
You know, just after September 11, an amazing decision was made. The first time in the history of the World Economic Forum to not host the annual meeting in Davos, but to organize it somewhere else. And we went to New York, where the September 11 happened. So I moved to New York a few days after September 11. When you were going downtown, the smoke was still happening for weeks. The mayor was Mayor Giuliani, and the next mayor was Michael Bloomberg. And we worked during 2-3 months to host the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in January 2002. Just few months to show the solidarity of the business community with the New Yorkers. What I did during that event, because I'm a strong believer in peace, I organized on the side of that conference in New York a meeting between Saudi leaders, Saudi businessmen, who are my friends, and the American businessmen, to understand that what is happening should not have an impact of the country where the terrorist or someone else is origin. This was a great evening, 150 Saudis with 150 Americans, businessmen, senators, congressmen. It was at a great restaurant called the Cirque in New York. And this is when we were able to reconnect Saudi Arabia with Americans. And this is when we realized that we can have this type of impact. And this is when we realized that during the Davos meetings, we should also talk about security, about culture, about all these geopolitical issues.
أثناء تنظيمك لمؤتمر دافوس في تلك السنوات، أيضا في 2004 أسست بيبلسس لايف. ما كان يتعارض مع عملك في مؤتمر دافوس ولا كان هذا مستقل؟
No. In fact, I was always in parallel of my joint venture with the World Economic Forum. I was always having my own global strategic communication event management company. working for multiple corporations in the world. The conflict started, the potential conflict started when I was contacted by the President Clinton. Former President Clinton, who I met in Davos, contacted me and told me, Richard, now that I am not president anymore, this is another anecdote that I will share with you. What should I do? I went to his office in Harlem of the Clinton Foundation. And I told him, Mr. President, I don't know what you should do, but I know what you should stop to do. He told me what? I said, Mr. President, you should stop to deliver speeches every week. Maybe you are making money, but you deserve much more than that. You are an icon. You are a brand. The power of brand. I told him, Mr. President, there is two world leaders who are amazing brands. Nelson Mandela and you. Nelson Mandela is sick. You should have your own platform. You are a leader that everybody will follow. You can be a change maker. He told me how. I said, let's create your own conference. 2 weeks later, I came back with his team. We submit to him the idea, the concept of the Clinton Global Initiative, which is a conference with action, with commitment. You don't attend the Clinton Global Initiative unless you, as a businessman, you are ready to contribute to finance actions for good. This is how was born the Clinton Global Initiative. And this is what I started to do in New York during the UN General Assembly. But this was perceived wrongly by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum as a competition. Back to your point. And unfortunately, I had to decide, but I had a long-term partnership with the World Economic Forum. So I told to President Clinton after 2 years, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I will give you my team in New York to continue to run your project, but I cannot be involved anymore. But it was very funny because 2 years ago, I went back to the Clinton Global Initiative. I saw the President and the Secretary Clinton, and both told me, oh, let's continue again. So this is great because the Clinton Global Initiative is still happening every year now. It is very inclusive. The positioning is different. It's about NGOs and a lot of things that the foundation is doing.
سيد ريتشارد، بما أنك أنت ذكرت مبادرة كلينتون العالمية، أعتقد أنت اطلعت على الاتهامات اللي بعد ما أعلنت هيلاري كلينتون ترشحها للرئاسة في 2014 تقريبا، بأن هناك لا يوجد شفافية بجمع التبرعات في هذه المبادرة. كيف ترد على هذه الاتهامات، وخصوصا أنت يعني بدأت في هذه المبادرة؟
I will share another anecdote with you. When we started the Clinton Global Initiative, President Clinton told me, Richard, how do you want to be paid? I said, you have my company, I will charge you some flat fees. He told me, no, why flat fees? I want to give you 10% of the sponsoring. I said, Mr. President, I don't think I want to go in that way. I have a small company. I really prefer to have my flat fees, and then I will deliver. Be the biggest mistake of my life. Why? I will give you numbers. It's transparent.
لماذا؟
My fees were $800,000 at that time to do the whole conference. You know how much he raised in 3 months?
كم؟
This is one way people are talking no transparency. People like Bill Gates, people like Warren Buffett, many people want to support this initiative. So the money was extremely transparent. He raised $1 billion before starting the Clinton Global Initiative. 10% means $100 million.
Wow.
So Bill Clinton has this power of convening people. And when I told him, Mr. President, you are a brand, I was right, in total humility. This is the power of a brand. Everyone wants to support Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, at that time, was a rock star. And I can tell you, when you go even today in the street and you see how people stop President Clinton and ask for autographs, want to take a picture with him, want to take a selfie. So he got the Peace Nobel Prize. We should not forget that. But he got it for a reason, And he's still having great ideas. I saw him on stage a few weeks ago in New York at the Clinton Global Initiative. So transparency about how you raise money. All foundations including the Future Investment Initiative Foundation, our foundation, but maybe we talk about it in a few minutes. We are all audited. We have audit because you have the duty to be transparent. This is why I think, you will always be criticized, whatever you do. It's like Davos, where people were saying, oh, this is the vehicle of blood money. No, because when you have global corporations attending a conference, you cannot say, oh, you are good, you are bad, In today's world, in all businesses, you have corporations who are criticized or supported. And to not name in particular many of them. It's public, so we know that companies very famous like Nike or Adidas or Starbucks were criticized for some of their practices. So, at the end of the day, we need to be very cautious on the rumors, we need to be very cautious on the gossips, and we always need to trust and to be a believer on what people are doing. But what Clinton Foundation is doing and did is absolutely outstanding. And I think we should keep more that than maybe some mistakes or other stuff which happened.
سيد ريتشارد، بعد هذا النجاح والإبداع في تنظيم دافوس في 2008 انتهت علاقتك بتنظيم دافوس. لا نقول انتهت علاقتك بكلاوس شواب، بتنظيم دافوس. لماذا بعد هذه السنوات الطويلة من النجاح انتهت هذه العلاقة بتنظيم مؤتمر دافوس؟
You want the official version or the fake version? No. I'm someone who always say the truth. And I will not escape the question. 2008, I decided to get married. It was my second marriage with the former First Lady of France, Cecilia. Klaus Schwab didn't like that. And he told me we should stop our partnership. So I told him, no problem. For me, my personal life is more important than anything else. But there is something I want to protect. My staff, because my staff and my employees are my family. So I will leave alone. But you continue the partnership with my company. So 2008 was my last Davos. I left the company. I sold my shares to Publicis. And I moved to Dubai with my wife. There is no other explanation.
استمرت علاقتك مع كلاوس شواب ولا انتهت في هذا الوقت؟
Absolutely. Absolutely. It ended that time. And this is when you know who are your friends, your real friends.
كيف؟
This moment of the life, because at that time, I saw who picked the phone, called me, invited us. And part of these people who called us, invited us, celebrating and respect my life and my decision and the decision of my wife. It's not easy to divorce when you are a first lady, trust me. And guess what? The majority of the people were coming from this part of the world, from the region here. So it's extremely interesting when you go through some challenges in your life, always, to see who are your real friends.
شعرت بإحباط بألم في تلك الفترة بعد هذه الحادثة؟
It is the best thing that Klaus Schwab did for me. Because what I started again, if I was still working in Geneva, I will not be here today. I will not have discovered the beauty of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I will not have I will be given the opportunity to do what I did since almost 20 years. I would not have created all the things I created in the past 20 years. I was in the comfort zone. So it is the best thing which happened to me. Al-Barakah al-Maktub. So this is why no depression at all. It was for me the best challenge. I changed the country. which is something I should have done at the very early stage, because I discovered United States of America and the American dream. I discovered the potential of the Arabic Peninsula. I spent a lot of time in Africa. I was able to see many African leaders, to advise them, to talk to them. And I started what I always wanted to do, which is to be helping countries to be more developed and to not just focus all day long on one big conference. Best thing which happened to me.
هذه الجرأة اللي عند ريتشارد أتياس، وأنا أتناقش مع فريق عملي من شباب وشابات جميعهم ذكروا لي أنه في 2008 ريتشارد أتياس في الوقت وفي الأزمة المالية العالمية، في الوقت الذي يهرب الكثير من رجال الأعمال في إنشاء شركات جديدة، ريتشارد أتياس هنا أنشأ شركة جديدة، شركة ريتشارد أتياس وشركائه. هذه الجرأة وهذه المخاطرة عند ريتشارد أتياس ما كنت تخاف منها؟
Few minutes ago, I told you I'm an entrepreneur in my blood. And this is why I love helping entrepreneurs. And an entrepreneur is what? Is a risk-taken person. And I am an optimist. This is why I'm a strong believer in peace. And I'm a strong believer on the fact that the economy is resilient. So when the crisis happened, 2008, almost many countries were bankrupt. And I told to myself, Richard, you are free now. You have time. So let's create something in New York from where the crisis started to find a solution to this crisis. I put all my money, all my saving. At that time, I had in my bank account $3 million. It was the money of the shares I sold to Publicis. I did something like in the casino. I took this 3 million with the support of my wife. And instead of buying a house, I created the New York Forum in New York. I invited everyone for free. 500 CEOs came, la crème de la crème. And they said, guys, for 3 days, we will work together to see how we will solve the economic crisis, how we will reinvent business models. Mike Bloomberg was the mayor of New York. He supported me. The New York Times supported me. And I knew that you can always find a solution from where the problem is. As a former mathematician, I know that when you put an equation or a problem on the table, it's already half solved. So we had 3 editions of the New York Forum. I put all my money on it to make it the best in class. Everyone was my guest. Because this was my contribution on how to restart the economy from the city, which is one of the capital of the world, New York City. And in fact, it was the best investment I did because the phone started to ring. Richard, can you do something equivalent to the New York Forum in my country? Richard, can you come and help us to restart the machine economically? Richard. And this was another milestone of my life. So I don't think it was bored or it was intuition. I wanted to have a contribution on restarting the global economy, on restarting the creation of jobs. We did exactly the same in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia after COVID and during COVID. If we have time, I would be happy to say a few words about that.
راح نجي ونتكلم عنها، فاردين لها محور مستقل. في 2008 حدثت في الصين دورة الألعاب الأولمبية، وكانت هذه الدورة مميزة جدا. ماذا كان دور ريتشارد أتياس في هذا الحدث؟
Thank you for that question because it's extremely important for me. I am not doing only conferences. This is a visible part of the iceberg. I'm passionate of creating sport events, big sport events, on also organizing every type of event which has an influence and which help a country to be branded. So at that time, I was still Publicis, and one of my division was doing public events. We were contacted by the Chinese government to say, can you help us on doing the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in China? We want China to be open to the world. So my company itself went to China. We're working with a director, famous movie director called director Li, L-I. And I spent 6 months in Beijing with my colleagues, with my teams, with a great creative director, Yves Pépin. And we built the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in China, which is for me one of the most moving opening ceremony. I rediscovered China, the new China. I was in China first time 1986. Everyone was on bicycles. Not a single person was speaking English. One hotel, Holiday Inn in Beijing, and that's it. 20 years later, everyone driving a car, 300 million people speaking English, which is more than in the United States of America. Extremely modern country, full transformation, stadiums everywhere, smart cities everywhere, electric bicycles and cars already. And we had a great time. Everyone was calling for boycott. We should not go to China. We should boycott the opening ceremony. I said, not a single event in the world should be taken as a hostage by any political beliefs. Because we don't do politics when we do events. We do events for who? For people. The joy of people when you go to a concert. The joy of people when you go to a sport event. When you are watching a game between Ronaldo and Neymar, do you ask if the guy sitting next to you is Christian, Jew, Muslim? Do you think he's voting for someone right or left, etc.? No. This is the beauty of sport. This is the beauty of music and culture. So I say, no way, we don't touch. And guess, at the opening ceremony, the whole world was that. All the people calling for a boycott, they went. And this is when the President Bush, George W. Bush, decided to come and to do his farewell because he was leaving the office just after that year. So amazing moment. And we continue to do that. We just, with my other hat as the chairman and the founder of my own strategic communication firm, Rيتشارد أتياس and Associates, we just did the opening and the closing ceremonies of the African Cup in Ivory Coast in January of this year. Another big moment for Africa. And by good coincidence, Ivory Coast won the African Cup this year, but it was an amazing moment.
بتنظيم المعارض أو الأحداث العالمية سواء رياضية أو ترفيهية مقابل المؤتمرات، أيهما أصعب؟
Everything is difficult. Why? Because you play live. And you know what it is.
نعم.
Because you are also a man of media. So when we say, click, you're on air, you don't have any other opportunity. You need to be ready. You need to be ready for everything. So the difficulty is to be ready on time and to know that you have to play live. But everything has its own DNA, its own adrenaline. When you do public events, like opening ceremonies, like the expo, like stuff like that, you know that you are doing that for people. You are delivering a great message to people. You are helping people to understand, to acquire knowledge, to have joy, to have emotion. So you are very proud when you create emotion. You are an architect of emotion, which is amazing. When you do conferences, I never do conferences for money. I do conference to bring an outcome. Because you say, okay, what are the outcomes of this conference, We started 50 conferences in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The same question I ask myself every time is what will be the outcome? We started the Future Mineral Forum 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Why we were believing strong on that? Because we knew that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia can play a big role in mining industry and mining for good. It's already the case. We supported a few days ago. We created the Global Logistic Forum for the Ministry of Transport. And we realized the potential of the kingdom in terms of logistics and the kingdom becoming a hub worldwide, creating jobs, inspiring the young people to join the logistic industry, to join the mining industry, to join the aviation industry. So you have the feeling, which is the same, you contribute to something positive. This is part of the legacy. You are not just a producer. You are someone who is a catalyst, someone by bringing people together, you create added value. And this is the most important. It's not about you. It's about what you create and what is your impact. Your impact. This is the world, to answer to your question.
جميل. نعم. أعود إلى 2009. يبدو تلك السنوات أنت ابتعدت عن التنظيم أو بدأت تخرج عن تنظيم المؤتمرات بشكل أصح. والدليل أنه في 2009 أنت نظمت حفل ذكرى تولي الملك عبدالله الثاني في الأردن. لماذا نظمت هذا الحفل؟ هل تربطك بعلاقة شخصية مع الملك عبدالله الثاني أم ماذا بالضبط؟
I cried that day. I cried that day.
لماذا؟
I will tell you first to answer to your question. I met the king of Jordan, King Abdullah, in Davos when he became king. And we had a good connection. And he invited me to come with him in the Silicon Valley to meet with the late Steve Jobs. So thanks to King Abdullah of Jordan, I met Steve Jobs in the company called DreamWorks doing animation movies. And I remember we were waiting together and the king told me, Richard, what can I do in my country? I don't have the size to do something like Davos. I told him, Your Majesty, you are a small country, but you have big ideas always. Why we don't start in one of the most beautiful parts of Jordan, which is Petra, the Nabatean city? Why we don't bring the great minds of the world? Let's bring the Nobel laureates. And they will discuss together about the future of education, the future of science, the future of literacy. So the relationship started. We created 3 Nobel conferences in Petra, in the middle of nowhere, in front of this beautiful gate, the Nabatean, which at that time the world didn't know about العائلة, you know, but now it's amazing. So the relationship started, and one day his chief of staff contacted me and told me, Richard, we have a very important moment to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the accession of the throne. I said, oh my God, my gift. Because I'm so happy to support Jordan. This is a great moment. So I worked with my team on this extremely emotional moment. I did a deep dive on the history of Jordan. And I will tell you why I cried. Because it was in the stadium of Amman. The whole royal family was here. 25 Jordanians were in the stadium. And I put 3 big, giant LED screens on the stadium. And we were producing images like if it was a book. We're turning the page, like you are doing very nicely with me today, bringing back from my very young age to today. So my deal was to tell the history of the kingdom, the Hashemite kingdom. And how did we start? I start with a very simple idea. Everybody was sitting, and suddenly in the stadium, the famous voice of the late King Hussein started. On the LED screen, the first page of the book, the face of the late King Hussein announcing the birth of the Emir Abdullah. We started talking about these 10 years by starting about the day he was born. It was so emotional because if you remember well, the late King Hussein has a very specific voice, very charismatic, very strong. Everybody cried, including me.
واو. ماذا قال لك الملك عبد الله بعد هذا الحدث؟
He took me in his hands and we cried together.
ما زالت تربطك علاقة جيدة مع الملك عبد الله؟
Yes. We hosted him in Riyadh a few years ago, and we are very happy to host the Crown Prince of Jordan in few days at FII. And each time I have the opportunity to meet with His Majesty, I see him time to time during the UN General Assembly in New York. We are always, I respect a lot.
أنا آسف إنه قلبت المواجع، يعني واضح حتى من عيونك إنه متأثر إلى الآن بهذاك الحدث.
Yes, because you know, at the end of the day, what you will keep when you will be at the eve of going on the other side of the life, you know. It's this moment of emotion. This is why I do what I'm doing. As I told you, I'm trying to build bridges between people, which means we build emotion, we connect. I had 4 or 5 moments like that in my life, you know. Of course, the day my daughter was born, it's another big emotional moment, but also in Davos. First time President Mandela came. This guy was in jail for years and years. And Nelson Mandela came to Davos. 1 minute before going on stage, he's telling me, I need to go to the restrooms. I say, oh my God, they are very far. And suddenly you are here with Nelson Mandela, hand in hand, going to the restrooms. Sorry for the detail. And when he was in the restrooms, he was talking to me and told me, Richard, you know what is the most important thing today? I say, no, Mr. President, the young people, the youth. Whatever we should do is by listening to the youth and doing everything we do for the young people. And then we went back on stage. This was a very important emotional moment. And this is a day when I understood that nothing in the world should be done without the youth. We need to be always inclusive. And this is why I support Vision 2030. Because if you read it very well, everything which is done in this country is for the young people, the vibrant society of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
جميل.
Many people are talking about the youth. Very few are doing for the youth.
جميل. بنتقل إلى المملكة العربية السعودية وبداية علاقة ريتشارد أتياس مع السعودية. متى بدأت هذه العلاقة مع المملكة العربية السعودية؟
Oh, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was 20 plus years ago. As I told you, I met 2-3
يعني بداية
Saudi decision leaders. Exactly, and I was asked to come to Riyadh and to organize the first economic conference called at that time the Global Competitiveness Forum, which was hosted by Sagia. And Sagia was the ancestor of what is today MISA, the Minister of Investment of Saudi Arabia. So I started, and I did that for almost 7-8 years. Every year, we're doing in January, before Davos. It was called From Sand to Snow. We're doing this great economic conference in Riyadh. And this was my relationship with the kingdom, you know. But at that time, the kingdom was the kingdom of oil. And everything was about oil and oil. And we're not really talking a lot about the transformation, the diversification. Then we had a moment of silence. And then, I would say, probably almost 10 years ago, I got a call from a friend who told me, I would like to introduce you to a gentleman who would like to organize a conference. And this gentleman, who is an amazing guy, is His Excellency Badr al-Asakar, who was the Secretary General of the MISC Foundation. And when I understood what the MISC Foundation was, youth, I said, oh my God, of course, we have to create something about the youth, a conference of youth. I'm in. We shake hands. And we started the MISC Global Forum together. And I realized then that this MISC Foundation was the foundation of His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman. So this is how the relationship started. And then a few months later, I was contacted by PIF, the Public Investment Fund, which was at that time, I would say, a medium-sized entity. And I was asked by the team of His Excellency Yasser Rumayyan, who was the governor of PIF, to think about another conference or another event on how to promote investment. And then this is when I started for the first time to meet His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, who was Deputy Crown Prince, but he was the chairman of PIF. So this is how the relationship started almost in 2015, 2016.
إذا تتذكر الحديث اللي دار بينك وبين سمو ولي العهد الأمير محمد بن سلمان في أول لقاء؟
I will never forget it. I will never forget because I am too old to flatter people. So I will tell you why I was impressed. you see a young man of 27 years old. And in 10 minutes, you understand that he is extremely intelligent. He thinks 10 times faster and ahead you. And I will tell you why. 2, he's a visionary man. And 3, he's a doer. And 4, he's a humanist. He cares about people. You see that from what he says. And this is why I decided to support this leader no matter what. So this is how the relation started. And I went to present the concept of what became FII. But he raised the bar 20 times. I came with a simple idea, and I will never forget what he told me. Told me, Richard, with your creativity and my vision, we should do something 10 times bigger. So I came back, second chance, to present the new concept of FII. And this is how was born FII. But if at that time, 8 years ago, you were telling me that this conference will become the #1 conference in the world, hosting in few days 7,000 global CEOs from all over the world, 600 speakers who wants to speak and calling me every day until now, I want to come, I want to come, I want to come, I will tell you, no, forget, it's in utopia, it never happened. This is what was achieved under the vision of the Crown Prince. But at that time, the second thing I will not forget, after we decided what it will be, he briefed us about what should be the content. 10 years ago, he was the first leader, because I had the privilege to meet many leaders, who told me, by the way, you should talk about AI and robotics. No one was talking about AI 10 years ago. And you should talk about the ethics of robotics and AI. And maybe one day we'll go to the UN to establish a charter to regulate AI and ethics. 10 years ago. Vision. Passion. Intelligence. And as His Royal Highness told on stage at FII one day, this place is for the dreamers and doers. He's a dreamer and a doer.
في 2017 أطلقت المملكة مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار، وكانت تحت مظلة صندوق الاستثمارات العامة السعودي. تم تعيينك رئيس تنفيذي أو مدير تنفيذي لهذه المبادرة. حدثني عن رؤية هذه المبادرة في البداية.
When we started the FII in 2017, it was just a conference hosted by the Public Investment Fund. And it was funded by PIF under the leadership of His Excellency Yasser Rumayyan. And we did 3 editions, 2017, 2018, 2019, one more successful than the other, thanks to the quality of the content, thanks to the quality of the infrastructures, and thanks to the hard work of everyone. And then one day His Royal Highness said, what do you think should be next? So I suggested, why we don't have our own vehicle? Because we can do much more than just a conference, Your Royal Highness. He said, absolutely, I want you to do many things. I want initiatives, I want a project, I want maybe scholarship program. So to do that, you need to have a vehicle. So he came with the idea of creating a not-for-profit foundation. This is how was born the FII Institute by royal decree. And then I was so privileged and so honored. I remember that moment. He was surrounded by 10 leaders. I was invited because it was almost the dinner of FII. And in the middle, by surprise, he said, oh, he was talking to a gentleman who was a former Prime Minister of Italy, Matteo Renzi. And he told me, Matteo, we'll create a foundation. And Richard will be the CEO. So this is how it was born. And I'm so honored and so privileged that we had this opportunity to create this amazing institution, now almost 5+ years ago. And it is now the home of FII. It is a home of multiple initiatives. It is a home of an investment arm, which is investing in some startups. And we are launching many initiatives. We have indexes, you have all of this. And we have an amazing board, chaired, as you know, by His Excellency Rumayyan, but also with Her Royal Highness Princess Rima, with Matteo Renzi, who became member of the board, with Noel Quinn, the former CEO of HSBC, with Mohamed Al-Abbar from MR, with Professor Adam Mutairi, who is a great Saudi scientist who is in America, and of course with my friend Tony Chan, who was the president of KAUST, and last but not least with also, I think, I don't want to forget anyone, but I think we have an amazing board. And Peter Diamandis, of course, the founder of the X Prize, who is one of the pioneers on technology. So we have an amazing board, an amazing team, small team, but we became financially almost independent. This is the particularity, because if you want to be credible, if you want to be legitimate, you need to become independent. So we have people working for the foundation in New York, some people working in Dubai. And we are so privileged to have 45 strategic partners. We don't call them sponsors because they are really in bed with us. They are supporting our initiative. And we decided a few months ago to become a membership organization because we became almost a movement. Because what we're trying is to have an impact on humanity. And we realized that people want to support us, like they supported the Clinton Foundation. So we have almost now 1,200 members, plus 45 partners. And this is how we have this machine moving forward at the speed of our resources. And we are very attached to our independence.
جميل.
And more to come, inshallah.
في 2018 جميعنا شفنا بداية مؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار، ونجح نجاح باهر، وكلنا كصحفيين موجودين وانبهرنا من هذا النجاح. كيف استطاع ريتشارد أتياس أن يتجه إلى الشرق وأن يعوض هذا النقص اللي كان موجود من الهجوم والقطيعة على مؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار؟
I knew from the very beginning of the years of the 21st century that this part of the world is the barycenter of the world. It is a place where north meets with south and west meet with east. And because I am so privileged to be not just an observer, but a player in the geoeconomics, I was observing the shift between west and east, north and south. My 6 months plus in China, my 1 year living in Japan, I understood what is happening in the east. And the west was sleeping. I was sad to see Europe slowing down. This is why I left Paris in 2002 and I moved partially to New York, because I was not feeling anymore the energy. The West was in comfort zone, while the East and the South was angry. We want to have our part of globalization. So when I was given the opportunity to create something in Saudi Arabia, the barycenter of the world, the place where the center of the compass, I knew that something will happen from here. So this is why we have, I think, in total humility, this success. Because we are perceived as a connector, we are perceived as a catalyst, we are perceived as a place where ideas were born, we are perceived as a place where you feel the energy, and you feel the young people, and you have at the same table the Chinese and the Americans, while they don't talk when they are in America or in China. You have at the same table the African, who are sometimes excluded from many conversations, because Africa is a continent that we cannot ignore. 1.2 billion people, soon 2 billion people. We're extremely happy to host in a few days the new Africa Summit just before the main FII. So, and also women. Look what the kingdom now is doing, The women are running the show here now, to be honest, So this inclusion, this inclusivity is extremely important. So this is why I think these are the parameters of what we can, in total modesty, call the success of FII. And of course, when you are strong and you have strong roots and you have a strong DNA, you can resist to any crisis. The 2018 crisis, as you have mentioned, the COVID crisis, we were resilient. We are the only conference which didn't stop during COVID-19, which was hosted. The only one in the world.
سنتطرق لهذه الحادثة في حينها إذا سمحت لي. سيد ريتشارد، أنت تحدثت عن اهتمام سمو ولي العهد في أول لقاء عن الذكاء الاصطناعي. في هذه النسخة، نسخة 2018 في مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار، أطلقت روبوت صوفيا وحصل لاحقاً على الجنسية السعودية. هذه الخطوة من المملكة العربية السعودية، هل هو كان إعلان للعالم وكان أول روبوت في العالم يحصل على جنسية؟ هل هو إعلان للعالم اهتمام المملكة العربية السعودية في الذكاء الاصطناعي؟ ما هي الرسالة؟
You have a good memory. MashaAllah. When I was briefed by His Royal Highness on the content of what should be the conference, because he was briefing us with His Excellency Rumayyan regularly about, don't forget to talk about this, don't forget to talk about that, don't forget to invite that person, don't forget to bring that. So to support his vision on AI and robotics, I told to my team, guys, we need to find a robot. We need to bring robots here. So we started with the first robot from SoftBank and Boston Dynamics called Pepper, small robots. And then I discovered this Sophia robot, which is extremely sophisticated. And by the way, it is almost, I will not say the ancestor, but it is one of the robots who was at the origin of what we saw a few days ago with the new robot coming from Tesla. So we invited the founder, the creator of Sophia the robot. She came. And in fact, I discovered the robot before putting her on stage. She was speaking. I was amazed and scared. And then one day I told to Her Royal Highness, when we were briefing him with His Excellency Rumayyan, Your Royal Highness, we have bringing a robot, and she will talk. He was very excited. And I say, Your Royal Highness, I have a stupid idea, if I may. I say, this robot has no identity. And you told me one day, Your Royal Highness, that we should go to the UN, and that one day we should potentially ask the UN to recognize robots as part of our humanity. So why we don't give a citizenship? I thought he would tell me, you are crazy. And all the cabinet members were looking at me like, and he said, great idea, let's do it. And he made the decision, of course, submitted to His Majesty the King. And I didn't believe it until I saw it. So the first robot of our humanity is a Saudi citizen. And she got the passport. And Sophia came back, and with her sisters last year on stage.
ما هي الرسالة في هذه الخطوة؟
The message is very clear for me. Sorry, I cannot speak on behalf of His Royal Highness. But how I read the message is that, number one, Saudi Arabia is extremely serious on AI and robotics, that Saudi Arabia believe on technology, that Saudi Arabia will potentially one day become a developer, a creator, a manufacturer of robots. And when you see what NEOM project is about, you can easily guess that inshallah one day we could have factories manufacturing robots, having labs. Because as I say always, NEOM is not the future, it is a present now. So definitely we need to increase these opportunities. I think this is the message I read. We are extremely serious on AI and robotic. We have a vision, we have a strategy, and we will be a key player and potentially a leader in that industry. This is how I read it.
في 2019 صار في خطوة مهمة جدا لمبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار، وهو تحويلها إلى مؤسسة مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار، مؤسسة مستقلة بعيدة عن مظلة صندوق الاستثمارات العامة. ما الفرق بين عندما كانت تحت مظلة صندوق الاستثمارات وعندما أصبحت مؤسسة مستقلة؟
You know, it is giving you a lot of flexibility. When you are perceived as independent is great. And it helps us a lot to have strategic partners who are giving financial contribution to the institution. You cannot have corporations like HSBC, like Franklin Templeton, like Aramco, like all the big partners we have, they cannot give money to PF. They can give money to a not-for-profit foundation. This is a big change. You cannot become a member of PF. You can become a member of the FII Institute. You cannot be launching initiatives, index, if you are not an institution, if you are just an event. So the mission of PF is not to be an event organizer. Okay, it's a sovereign wealth fund. So this is why when you have this foundation, you are very independent, you are very flexible, you can do whatever you want in terms of initiatives. It's a big difference. We have PF as a founding partner. We have definitely a lot of support from many Saudi institutions because they are global players. We have almost all the big champions of Saudi Arabia supporting FI Institute because they are the global champions in their respective industries, So we have almost all the giga projects. We have many banks. We have Saudia. We have Riyadh Air. So we are a platform from Saudi Arabia to the world. And FII is not about the propaganda of what is happening in Saudi Arabia. FII is a global conversation happening in Saudi Arabia, because it is a very center of the world, about investment. And to quote His Royal Highness again, when we created FII, he said, never forget, this should be the place where investors will come to understand where to put their money in terms of geographies and in terms of sectors. And this is what is our value proposition. You attend FII to have a better understanding where the wind, in which direction the wind is blowing. And this is why I see many people year after telling me, wow, you know what? I started a new division on food security because I realized at FII 3 years ago that food security will be big. I realized that biotech will be great. I realized that sport marketing will be massive. Short anecdote. As you know, we started to deploy FII in different countries and continents. In Miami in January, we have an FII summit. David Rubinstein, the founder of one of the largest private equity in the world, Carlyle, went on stage with his daughter for having a conversation. And he said, me as David, I decided with my own money as a family office to invest a lot now on sports. So I realized with many other people, during that FII, session after session, many people were coming on stage and say, oh, I am investing on sports. Steve Cohen, Tom Brady, of course, but many investors who were investing usually on real estate, on, energy, suddenly they are investing massively on sport marketing. And I thought to myself, wow, sport is becoming a big industry. And this is why you understand that the kingdom is right to have also sport as one of the key pillars of the transformation of the economy, because sport is booming, because sport is not just to have fun and joy, it's a real business, and there is a lot to do in sport. As Nelson Mandela was saying, sport is an amazing tool for social progress and economic development, to quote the late President Mandela. So these are things that we learn. FII is becoming a platform for understanding, for knowledge, for connections, for initiatives. And as I said to many of your colleagues of the media a few days ago, the past 7 years of FII, $120 plus billion of deals were made. 120 billions. And we are expecting this year, in few days, to see on stage signatures, not of MOUs, real deals, around $28 billion of deal that we know already in our horizon.
Wow.
So, and investment for good. Invest for humanity, creating jobs, creating ecosystem, supporting entrepreneurs. This is why I'm extremely proud of what the team is achieving.
سيد ريتشارد، ذكرت قبل قليل عن جائحة كورونا. أثناء الجائحة، النسخة الرابعة من مؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار، اتخذت خطوة جريئة، هو أن يكون هذا المؤتمر في هذه النسخة حضورياً أثناء الجائحة. ما كان عندك مخاوف من هذه الخطوة؟
I will tell you why we did it.
لماذا؟
Because the kingdom never stopped. Point number one. Number two, if you remember well, 2020 was the year where the kingdom was hosting the G20.
نعم.
And I was extremely privileged with my own company, RNA, to organize, which by the way is owned now 75% by Sanabil and PIF, to organize the G20. We're talking about 200 events. We started in person, then we went virtual, then we ended hybrid. We achieved and delivered 200 extremely successful events. Our staff were wearing masks. They got the vaccine. I am the first of my whole family and friends who got the vaccine where? In Riyadh, where people were still waiting in the United States of America or in Europe to get the vaccine. So the country was safe, was putting amazing health protocol. The first app developed by Sadaya, on how to monitor you. So I was feeling extremely safe. So I say, there is no reason to be scared. And we need to send a strong message of optimism from the kingdom again. So I convinced everyone that we should host a conference here, hybrid, 500 people, not more. This is a quota which was given to us by the Ministry of Health, to be sure that we could respect the 2 meters distance between delegates, and to be sure that everyone has a vaccine, and even the second vaccine, masks. And mashallah, the conference was extremely successful, and we send a very strong message to the world, that our humanity is more stronger than anything else, and that more stronger than any pandemic. Everybody was happy, people made deals, the business was continuing, as we say in the entertainment industry, the show must go on. And we sent a very strong message. The board decided that the team, and I remember very well Her Royal Highness Princess Rima, who is a member of our board, suggesting a great team, supported by Matteo Renzi, the Prime Minister of Italy, and you will understand why, because he was the mayor of Florence, Firenze in Italia, and we call it the Neo-Renaissance. The Renaissance was born in Italy, as you know, and we send a message to the world, we will see the renaissance of our humanity. And we were right. And we were right. 12 months later, the world was back almost to normal. And look today, industry like tourism and others are booming. And we are all forgetting that 3-4 years ago, we're all wearing masks and locked down in our houses. So again, I wanted to be optimist. I wanted to be a fighter. I was supported by everyone, supported by the leadership. And we were right, ما شاء الله.
جميل. إذا سمحت لي هناك تصريح في 2021 سأقرأ لك إذا سمحت لي سيد ريتشارد. ذكرت في اندمندة عربية 2021 أن دور المؤسسة مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار التي تقف وراء المؤتمر الذي يعرف بدافوس الصحراء لم يعد مقتصرا على تنظيم الفعاليات في السعودية أو الشرق الأوسط فقط. فهي اليوم تتطلع لأن يكون لها تأثير عالمي في رحلة التحول إلى الاقتصاد الجديد الذي سيكون مركزه الشرق لا الغرب. هذه الجملة أنا صراحة شدتني من خلال قولك الاقتصاد الجديد سيكون مركزه الشرق لا الغرب. ما المقصود فيها؟
First of all, you need to help me on something. We should kill this nickname of Davos of the desert. Number one, we're not Davos. And number two, we're not in the desert. Riyadh is one of the most developed cities in the world.
أنا نقلتها نصا.
No. But of course, I'm just using this opportunity to say.
إذا سمحت لي هناك الكثير من الإعلاميين وهذه فرصة أنك تتوضح موضوع هذا الاسم. كثير من الإعلاميين يستخدمون هذا المصطلح.
I know. But it's not about you. It's about just as a side joke. We are FII, we have built an amazing identity. And now, unfortunately, everyone is really calling us FII. And it's not a conference about the Middle East. It's not a conference about Saudi Arabia. As I told you, it's a global conference, a global conversation happening here. 2 points to your question. Number one, we realize year after year that many stakeholders were not able to come to Riyadh end of October. Some people, they had some board meetings. Some people, they were not to be part of the conversation. Some people in Africa cannot travel so far. Some people in Latin America, too expensive even to come to Riyadh, etc., etc. So we decided to continue this global conversation everywhere. This is why we launched what we are calling the FII Priority Summits. We started in the United States in Miami, because Miami is a new economy city. Then we did in Asia. We were the first one organizing a conference after COVID in China/Hong Kong. Then we went to Latin America a few months ago in Brazil, because Brazil is the #1 global economy of Latin America, etc. So we are global. Inshallah, 2025, we'll go to Europe. We'll probably go to another country in Asia, and we will potentially organize something in Africa. So we are hosting global conversations everywhere. And the main global conversation is happening in Riyadh, and will always, inshallah, happen in Riyadh, because, as I said, it is the center of the global ecosystem, economy, etc. But definitely, as I said, everyone was ignoring the emergence of the East and the emergence of the South. So when people are challenging us about what, we are the one who said, one of the thematic 4 years ago, guys, there is a new global order. There is a new order in terms of economy. And there is the emergence of the global South. Now everyone is talking about the global South. And this is why we started by delivering the message, guys, the world is moving east. Then the world is moving south. So this is a new global South. And guys, to understand that, because many of you continue to be blind, we are helping you to design a new compass to help you to navigate in this new economy. And this is why you see this emergence. So the answer to people who are saying, why? No, guys. We are pioneers in total humility about what is happening in geoeconomics. And this is, we start every year our FII conference with a big session called the Board of Game Changers. And we put around the table, under the chairmanship of His Excellency Yasser Rumayyan, many players from the East, from the West, from the North, from the South, who are influential on their respective businesses, to tell us what are the trends of this global economy. And year after year, we understand that the business is booming in the East, in the South. It is what it is.
سيد ريتشارد، تعرف أكثر ما شدني في شعار مؤسسة مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار؟ التأثير على الإنسانية. كيف ربطتم موضوع الإنسانية في أهداف هذه المؤسسة الاقتصادية؟ اشرح لي هذه الفكرة.
When we met with His Excellency and with the board, we said, okay, what should be our goal? What should be our goal? And His Excellency Rumayyan, as a governor of PIF, was telling us, guys, what we should do is always to encourage investment for good. Investment for good. We need to also be inclusive. So we came with the idea of, okay, if we want to have investment for good, let's have an impact on humanity. Because how can we measure the investment for good? We need to see how it impacts our humanity. So humanity was the key word, and impact on humanity was definitely the answer to invest for good. And then we say, okay, on which sectors? We need to impact on education. Extremely important, the most important. We need to have an impact on healthcare. We need to have an impact on our planet, sustainability. And we should not ignore how technology will help. This is why we have 4 pillars: AI, robotics, education, sustainability, healthcare. This is how the idea was born. And then after COVID, we realized what? We realized because of COVID that many healthcare systems were broken in the world. Many people didn't have access to education because almost 90% of the kids in Africa, they were not able to have online education. Yes, kids in Europe, in America, they went at home and they were able to continue the classes. But in Africa, you don't even have electricity. You don't have computers. So how can you have education online? We lost a full generation of kids during 1 year and a half in Africa.
إذا سمحت يا سيد ريتشارد، هذه المعلومات أخذتوها من تقارير أنتم قمتوا فيها بمؤسسة مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار؟
Yes, absolutely. And I knew that. It was public. So we said, now We don't need just to have an impact in humanity. We need to invest in humanity. Because by investing in humanity means you are investing in education, investing in healthcare. And this is what we're pushing. You will see in few days in Riyadh during FII, many sessions are dedicated to the future of healthcare, the future of education, the future of technology, how AI can help also to solve all these problems. Because AI has many good things, you know, and it helps to do remote diagnostic for healthcare. You don't need to send a doctor. You can have an AI doctor. And you will see we have at AI a huge, when you will come, inshallah, to our conference, we are starting by what we're calling the well-being gallery, where you will see technologies supporting healthcare. So this is how humanity became our motto, our direction, our compass. Everything we do every year with my colleagues, every morning, we ask one question: what can we do today for the benefit of humanity? This is our guideline. It's our mini vision 2030.
في العام الماضي في مؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار استطعتوا أن تجمعون شخصيات صناع قرار تتجاوز أصولهم 11 تريليون دولار. كيف استطعتم في مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار أن تجمعون هذه الشخصيات لرسم خارطة الاقتصاد العالمي؟
And you will be even more surprised this year. We don't have any one board of game changers. We have 3 boards of game changers. The quality of the people coming, we're not able to put 30 people around the table, so we have 3 times 10. Back to your question. I think it's a combination of many things. Number one, the trust on what we do. People trust that what we do is good, is ethical, is sincere. Extremely important. So all these people that we know well, and many of them in total humility, I know them for 25 years, 30 years. So when we wrote to them and we told them, guys, you need to come to attend a global conversation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is a country which really wants to be a game changer, in a country which has a vision, with a leader who wants to transform and to have an impact on his people, on the region, and on humanity. Remember what His Royal Highness said on stage. He said, I don't want to die before I see this region being the new Europe. And this is what is happening. So people know that. People understand the sincerity, the seriousness, the credibility. This is why they come and they come back. Because they see great conversations. They see that we are investing a lot of effort and time to bring great content, to have an expected conversation, to have a better understanding. And they are all considering themselves, in fact, as game changers. And this is why you see the top private equities in the world, the top sovereign wealth fund of the world, the top technology company this year. We have people who are the president of Google coming, the number 2 NVIDIA coming, the big players on artificial intelligence, on technology are coming. We have the CEO of TikTok coming. So the whole world is coming to the kingdom because they feel the energy of the kingdom and the will of the kingdom to transform many areas, many sectors, and to lead the global conversation. Once again, it's not about the kingdom. It's about global conversation about the world and what should we do on renewable energy. When they hear His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman every year, they come back because every year they learn a lot from him. They learn about his concept of the circular economy that he started years ago. They understand how serious we are and the kingdom is on trying to be carbon neutral in few years. It's not easy, but we have all this conversation in total transparency, no censorship. Everyone is at the table. All voices are raised. People who are in favor of cryptocurrencies, people who are against cryptocurrencies. And we learn from them, and then after you make your own opinion. So these people are coming because they learn. And what a CEO wants, a global CEO, how multi-billionaire he could be, or how poor he could be, or she could be, they want to learn from others, to understand what are the best practices, what are the new ideas, what could be the next big idea. And this is, mashallah, what we are able to produce and to create during our conversations. And we have something unique also. We create at FI something that we call the conclaves. Conclaves means closed door meetings, no media, freedom of speech between public leaders and private leaders. And they speak openly. We say, guys, Let's reform the tax system. If you want me to invest, this is what I need. Let's change this on the energy. Let's do that. An amazing conversation.
سيد ريتشارد، كيف استطعت الحفاظ على الطابع الاقتصادي في هذا المؤتمر رغم حضور رؤساء دول بشكل دولي؟ مهمة صعبة.
No, it's not difficult. We have a mandate. We stay on our mandate. We control the content of the program. We don't schedule any political conversations. After people are free, freedom of speech on stage. And frankly speaking, what we see is that many CEOs, they don't want to talk about politics. They care about their companies, they care about their people, and they know that they have no influence on politics.
لكن إذا سمحت لي، في هناك مؤتمرات حول العالم اقتصادية، ولكن عندما نرى المتحدثين ينخرط المتحدثين الكثير بالمسائل السياسية.
But this is a definition of what the World Economic Forum is today. You have much more political leaders who are raising their voice than business leaders, in total objectivity. And when you read the media after Davos, the media are more talking about what the politicals said on stage, what Macron said, what President Trump said, what Angela Merkel was saying, what Vice Premier of China was saying, than what we are the opposite. We believe on the geoeconomics and the power. I'm not a politician. I am someone who is a strong believer on the power of the global economy. How to rebuild things, how to invest in education. I am a strong believer on the private sector, energy, on the corporations' energy. And you know the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is more than a country. It is a global corporation.
وسوف تستمرون على هذا الخط؟
We will always continue to be non-political organization and non-political discussions. We're inviting for some political leaders. But when they come on stage, they talk about geoeconomics. Last year, the president of South Korea spoke for 20 minutes about the potential of Korea, the vision of Korea, the impact of Korea to the global economy, the innovation of Korea, the attractivity of South Korea, etc. Happened the same with Kenya, happened the same with Rwanda. I was honored to have a conversation with the president of Rwanda. He has explained how his country became and is today the most advanced country in Africa in terms of technology, AI, etc. So, you know, world leaders, they want to talk about the potential of their countries and what their countries is doing in terms of innovation and many other stuff. You cannot exclude politics, but the politician leaders should understand that the machine, the economic machine, wants prosperity. And now political leaders, you need to do your job to bring stability. Because if you want big investment in your country, you need to bring stability. The key component of attracting foreign direct investment are two: trust and stability.
كان الانضمام لمؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل الاستثمار مجاني، لكن في النسخة السابعة تحولت إلى عضويات، تقريبا قيمة العضوية $15,000. ما الهدف من هذه الخطوة؟
In fact, we realized 3 years ago that many delegates who were coming say, hey, guys, what you are doing is amazing. I'm quoting them. I love your initiative on education in Kenya. I love your initiative supporting access to clean water in some countries like Vietnam or others. How can we contribute? How can we help you? So at the board, we say, why we don't become a membership organization? People will have a symbolic contribution. And we decided that will be probably the lowest membership in any international organization. To become a member of the FI Institute is much low cost than joining the other international foundations. So we launched that program, and we're extremely and positively surprised because in less than few weeks, few months, we got 1,000. Today we're almost 1,500. I think we'll stop at 2,000 members because we don't look for members just to have a financial contribution. We want them to play a role. We want to talk to them. We need to meet them. We need to welcome them well. So this is how we became a membership, because we realized that FII was not becoming just a meeting, it was becoming a movement. And people wanted to be part of the movement.
سيد ريتشارد، قبل لا أنهي هذا الحوار، تعرف ماذا يقول عنك بعض الناس؟ أو دعني أقول لك،
I hope not only bad things.
No. البعض يصفك بأنك الرجل الذي يهمس أحيانا في بعض آذان رؤساء الدول. ماذا يعني لك هذا الوصف؟
I'm thinking that as a compliment. But before answering, I will tell you what is my philosophy, my values, which I learned from my late father. Before he passed away, Allah yarhamu, he gave me one advice. He told me, Richard, never forget the rule of the 3 H. H number 1, humanism. Always, Richard, what you do, look at a humanist, how to help people, how to support people. Number 2, always keep your sense of humor. It will always keep you on your feet on the ground. Don't. Number 3, humility. Humility. Be always humble. So this last word is the answer to your question. Yes, sometimes I hear that. I hear that because I'm so privileged that my real job, my mission, is to help nations to be successful, to create jobs, to be inclusive. How to do that? Is by helping leaders to attract foreign investment, to diversify their economy, and of course to brand their nations, to be attractive. So I'm not speaking in the ears of the world leaders, it's too pretentious. But I am so privileged and so lucky to indeed be trusted by many world leaders. And because I'm a very straightforward guy, I don't have any agenda. I will always say the truth, even if the person is extremely important. Because I know many world leaders, their entourage are scared. They are not always able to say the truth. I am not someone who has an agenda, so I can tell the truth. And I will give you an anecdote. And my conferences are giving me the opportunity to meet many leaders, and they are so kind to accept to join our conversations, as you said 2 minutes ago, world leaders. And many of them are taking me to get my advice on many topics. Some of them are listening to the advice, some of them are not listening to the advice. 5 years ago, I was hosting a big conference in Africa, in Gabon, in Libreville. And I moderated myself, because one of my passion is Africa, a panel with 7 African presidents, talking about the future of Africa, talking about their vision, talking about what is needed in Africa to not be always a continent which is seen with a lot of, I would say, critics, corruption, etc. So we spoke about education, healthcare. At the end, we left and we went behind the tent. And I told them, gentlemen, Mr. President, this session was great, but there is a problem. If you don't do what you said on stage, you will all lose your jobs. Because I know them well, we made that as a joke. Today, 5 of them are gone. And you can guess, because it's public, all these African countries which had coup. Because they didn't invest in education, they didn't invest in healthcare, they didn't do inclusive economy, they were not taking seriously what their people wanted. They didn't fight against cost of living, they didn't invest in their countries, and one day they were rejected by the system. So, back to your questions, I'm not trying to speak in the ears of leaders. I'm just telling them the truth, because we are an observer. If you ask me how I would define myself, in total humility, I'm a global citizen. What is the definition of a global citizen? Is someone who wants to have an impact on the global world in subjects which matters, like climate change, education, healthcare. I want to support the young. I want to support the entrepreneurs. And this has to be global. You need to understand diversity. It's my passion. You need to understand all the cultures. You need to understand the power of different communities. And you need to travel to understand that. You don't do that through TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. You do that by meeting people, by being in touch with people, by caring, by listening. This is more what I am. And it would be too pretentious to say that you are close to world leaders. You are never close to any world leaders. You are never the friend of a world leader, because they should not have friends. It is the most difficult job in the world to be a world leader. Because at the end of the day, you are the only one who has to make the final decision for your country, for your people, for the world. It's a super difficult job. Super difficult job. You are extremely isolated when you are a world leader. So you can just contribute on some ideas, on some suggestions. But at the end of the day, world leaders do not need, they make their own decision. This is why, mashallah, they are world leaders. Because they are smart, they know what they are doing, and sometimes they do mistakes. And when they do mistakes, they know very quickly that it's a mistake. What we are trying to do at the FI Institute, as a last point or so, why we created the FII Priority Index, which is called the FII Priority Compass. For 3 years now, we do a global survey in the world. We question 50,000 plus people representing 51% of our humanity. And we ask one question, what is your priority? And I started that after the COVID, because I knew, I had the feeling that the priorities of every individual was changing after COVID. I'm sure it's your case, Mr. Abdullah. I am sure that what were your priorities before COVID are not the same than today. People realize the importance of families, the importance of health, the importance of education. So we asked the question. And people were expecting, oh, climate change will come number 1. Climate change came number 5. Number 1, cost of living. Number 2 was education and healthcare and security. So every year we are doing this index. We are publicizing soon. We will publishing the result of the 2024 Compass. But I can already tell you that cost of living is still number 1, 3 consecutive years. Number 2 is now healthcare, climate change, going up, and 3, healthcare. So the problem is not just to have an index. The problem is, what do you do after with all this information, leaders of the world? And the good news, to conclude on a very positive note, since we are in Riyadh today, and it is a result from a global survey. We ask where people are happy, where people have the most of trust and hope. The people from the global south now are much more optimistic than the people from the global north. And in the south, the most happiest people are the people of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
الحمد لله. سيد ريتشارد، أنا سعيد جدا بإجراء هذا الحوار.
It was my privilege and my pleasure and my honor to be with you, Mr. Abdullah.
ونلتقي بعد أيام في مؤتمر مبادرة مستقبل
Inshallah, with
الاستثمار.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.